when we talk about identities, we generally talk about I am, not I have. We either say am and we use an adjective like I am gay, or we use I am followed by some sort of noun like I am an engineer. But we don't say I have engineeringness or I have homosexuality. How core the person first language is to the identity way of thinking. As soon as you slip into I have autism, you begin to lose the whole identity piece. Whereas as long as people are saying I am autistic or I am an ADHDer, not I have ADHD, then you're into identity ways of looking at things.
Yeah, and I think as well in the like early days, if you like, of realizing that you are an autistic person, you hear clients, don't you, saying, I was thinking I might have autism, like say.
Yeah, or I've been diagnosed with autism. That's
well, yes.
Yeah, I've been diagnosed.
Yeah, with autism, yes. But actually, then it keeps it separate from the self. It doesn't it? It's as if that is a thing over there. And then we have got the work to do of like saying, well, yes, that's autism over there, let's say, and this is me over here. How are the two going to be integrated? What does it mean for me as a person?
Yeah, we're talking about identity today, autistic identity, neurodivergent identity. And I suppose in some ways, identity is partly part of the diversity paradigm, isn't it? The neurodiversity paradigm, but also the broader diversity paradigm. It's all connected in with identity politics and all those terminology. In other words, it's an alternative to pathology. This is just who I am, not this is the problem I have.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. And it's, yes, exactly. And it's us talking about us instead of being talked about.
Yes. That's very important, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose, identity is what I identify with and who I identify as, and it's not how I'm identified.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
quite. True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I don't know whether this is related, but yesterday I was talking to someone and they were saying, oh, yeah, I've heard that analogy before where there's two kinds of computers, one's a Windows and one's a Mac, but it doesn't really do anything for me. And so we talked about it for a little bit. And I was saying, well, I use Apple Mac and I know that you can get all the Microsoft programs to work on Apple these days. I don't do it, actually. I let the Apple be the Apple. But I know that people do. So if you ever send me anything on PowerPoint, I can't open it in the right way and things like that. But you can. The point is that you can. And the thing is that, yes, we have known that they are Windows, and they run in that way. And the Apple is an Apple. But it's not as if the Apple Macs have only run Windows programs not knowing that they were Apple. There are two distinct ways of going about operating. That's fairly clear.
And the fact that if an effort is made, they can communicate.
Yes,
that's actually the whole point. There's a difference, but now let's work on communicating across that difference. But you can't communicate across the difference if you don't identify the difference. And some clarity around those identities. Yeah.
And when you go and download any software, it lets you select whether you're Mac or Windows because equally valid, and they're saying you could be either of these and that's okay. The program's suited for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, it reminds me, the other point that was occurring to me just leading up to this chat was, when we talk about identities, we generally talk about I am, not I have. We either, say, I am, and we use an adjective like I am gay, or we use I am followed by some sort of noun like I am an engineer. But we don't say I have engineeringness or I have homosexuality, and that I think was one of the practical points that you were talking about in your blog as well, how core the kind of person first language is to the identity way of thinking. As soon as you slip into I have autism, you begin to lose the whole identity piece. Whereas as long as people are saying I am autistic, or I am an ADHDer, not I have ADHD, then you're into identity ways of looking at things.
Yeah, and I think as well in the like early days, if you like, of realizing that you are an autistic person, it can be that you hear clients, don't you, saying I'm with autism, or I've been told I was thinking I might have autism, like say.
Yeah, or I've been diagnosed with autism. That's
well, yes.
Yeah, I've been diagnosed.
Yeah, with autism, yes. But actually, then it keeps it separate from the self. It doesn't it? It's as if that is a thing over there, and then we have got the work to do of like saying, well, yes, that's autism over there, let's say, and this is me over here. How are the two going to be integrated? What does it mean for me as a person?
Yeah.
Who am I, taking that into account? All this extra information that's over here in this concept informs me to help me learn more about who I am.
One thing I don't know much about, and I mean, the world doesn't know a lot about it yet, but perhaps some people who work with young autistic children might know a bit more about it than I do. And that is, what is it like to be working with the knowledge of being autistic, knowledge at some level from an early age, working with that from an early age in developing your identity, because everybody develops identity. Like nobody's born with an identity. You take it in and you figure it out, and you partly decide it at least a bit later in life. Earlier on, you just put, it's kind of put together from elements of the culture around you and so on. And I wonder what it's like and what it will be like for people to work with that identity from the very beginning. Whereas all the people I work with, and myself and yourself, we've all had to redo identity. We've had to do the unmasking thing. And I often think distorted sense of identity is actually a better term than masked, It's masked and camouflaged. All those terms imply how you look to the outside world, whereas, disconnected from and self-masked from your own identity is a much more accurate way of seeing it. So the whole identity terminology and language is very intimately tied in with the masking and unmasking process, I think.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about being isolated from any kind of feedback loop as well. That is relevant to you. So that's why it's so important, isn't it, to be part of a community, so to speak,
Yeah. Well, again, one of the key points you were making in your blog post was, that idea, that framework of identity is always partly individual, partly social, it's partly to who we are that's different, and it's partly to do with who we are that we share with other groups, like part of your identity might be being a gamer, because, but then that's not a thing you just do. It's a thing you share with other people. And so similarly, an identity like being autistic is partly defined by the things you have in common and the, ease of communication, relatively speaking, with other autistic people.
Yeah, definitely. And when we're talking about belonging to a community, I mean, when I was first realizing that I was autistic, it was around 2009. And, there was nothing really on the internet in those days. There was the Tony Attwood stuff about Asperger's, and there was some medical texts, but there's hardly anything on there. And I mean, social media hadn't really got going. I was on Facebook from 2007, but there's hardly anyone on there, and all you did was poke each other. You didn't actually do anything on there. Not like now, where people have got social media and the internet to be able to broadcast themselves, and they do. Autistic people really do. There's a chorus of voices out there just talking about everyday life, about being autistic. And that really helps to see real people being really autistic in normal ways in their life. And that, so you then get an opportunity to recognize somebody who's like you, and then you might see other people who are like you, and then there might be groups of people, and that's the community. You can go somewhere, but you might not be able to, or there might not be anything, or you might not feel that there is anything. But the fact that we've got access to people on the internet, in message groups and in all kinds of ways, and even just talking about, you and I talking about there being an autistic community. We don't go anywhere. We don't go to this community every Saturday morning or anything. We just are in it because we belong in it.
I know, and it's a great feeling. It's a bit like the feeling that a big fan of an author has, kind of the feeling towards that author, or, a big fan of gaming has towards some famous gamers or whatever. It's that sense that I feel like, obviously, I don't have any direct relationship with Pete Hornby, for instance, but I feel a connection with him because I've read his stuff and heard him speak on videos, and I feel, we're a part of that same community, hopefully someday it'd be lovely to meet some of these people, that you just see online, but still you feel, we're all on the same track. We're all trying to fulfill the same purpose. We're trying to raise awareness. We all very, very quickly identify with, oh yeah, me too, when we hear each other talking about things. And that's important. Now, one of the things, because, one thing we want to do, as always, is tie this in a bit with our therapy work. One of the things I found myself doing more and more, like I've always done it at some level, even outside of working with adult autistic clients, is kind of, link people with this notional community, not the actual community, not put people in touch with each other, though occasionally I've done that recently. I haven't worked with a little bit of a group, and recently I did put just two clients in touch with each other, and they met. But what I mean is, when a client is talking to me and they feel they're trying to figure out this identity and what's what within them, and what's valid, but also what's autistic, and what do they share with other autistic people, and they've read a bit and they've, watched videos and so on. And when I say things like, but like a lot of autistic people, including myself, and a lot of my clients often find such and such, and I give an example of, they often, find such and such a thing difficult, and people immediately go, do they? Like, that's like an autistic thing? Oh yeah, absolutely. God, I often wondered about that. So it's like there's another little tick on that's something, that's a thing. It's part of an identity I'm building up for myself, and they've never met any of these other people, as you say, though. Down the line, I think even that will change a bit, but it is like that kind of communitying, whatever it is we're doing, building a sense of us.
That's really subtle, actually. Yes, I really love that you're explaining that and drawing that into that, because it does do that, doesn't it, actually?
Yeah.
It's not othering as in the sense of them, those others. It's actually saying those others, yes, but something that we're all part of.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, I'm kind of saying this thing that's felt strange to you is actually familiar to a lot of people. It's not a strange thing. It's a familiar thing. If you just, I sometimes even say that. I say, like, one of these days you may end up, meeting a few autistic people in some context. And if you mention that to them, or as I said, if you go online and post that experience you've just mentioned on an autistic Facebook page, you will immediately get, oh, yeah. And in some ways that's enough for them, that I'm telling them that that's the case, even though they don't have the direct experience. So it's like an indirect thing. It's very, very exciting, really, to be able to do that,
I mean, I can remember when you and I first met, actually, and we met in that Facebook group. And then I started that Zoom thinking that the other autistic therapists would all come together to talk about best practice, which we started to do in a very polite way because we'd never met each other. But it just wandered into, and that's how
anyone else? Does anyone else ever?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was amazed. I was
Yeah.
so excited. I was thinking, these are people just like me. And it was so exciting. I'd never been amongst a group of people that were like me. Never, ever.
Yeah. And, we got together to do kind of lots of personal exploration together, really, before we got into doing some professional work together initially. Again, just wanted to find out what's your experience with the additional piece of, and what's your experience as a therapist who's autistic, but yeah, just trying to put the pieces in place and fit the identity together, is huge, really is. And by the way, it links with another piece that, we've been talking a little bit about, and then again, you've been blogging on, is the notion of the concept of the identity therapist. In other words, the therapist who openly identifies as something, in this case, autistic, some identity, some minority identity, and who largely works with other people who identify or think they might identify with that identity. And what that's like. It's an interesting piece. Like, maybe we'll do a specific discussion on that sometime. But to be honest, I'm only really getting into consciously exploring it at the moment, just how big a thing that is, and how the fact that I've been doing it now for a few years is impacting me in some great ways, but also in some challenging ways, So,
absolutely.
So again, but identity is the core within that.
Yeah.
Shared
and
identity.
You see, we've lived a long time, haven't we? So there's a lot of redoing to do. You think that you've done most of it, but then there's always little pockets, always little corners, when you speak to people, and it makes you think about things or identify with things, and you reflect and ask yourself questions about yourself and things like that.
Well, one of the kind of unmasking type questions, particularly when you've been unmasking for a while, is, as you get a bit more of a sense of your maybe more authentic identity, and look back and think, well, hopefully there was times that I didn't lose sight of that. I didn't know what it was, but I did hold on to some of my new self, even if I just thought, well, that's odd and eccentric, but it's me. But then there's other times you look back, and I'm talking about myself as well here, look back and think, God, I'm not that mad about who I was in that phase of my life, because to be honest, it was rather false, and not my real identity. And it doesn't feel very comfortable to look back. I did it for reasons, to survive, to get a bit of progress in career, to whatever it might be. That's what masking is all about. But you're kind of thinking, oh, it's very sad in a way, that was far from my real identity. It's a pity that I felt I had to be that at one stage, So
of course, yeah, absolutely. I know you see, there are losses, aren't there? It's great to find out and to put words to it, and to generate that shared meaning and all of the things, but also, of course, there is the realizations that brings, that you didn't have that before, or lost time or lost opportunities, or going down the wrong path in terms of relationships, and all the time that you spent not being yourself and not expressing yourself, not meeting your own needs. Lots of consequences sometimes, actually.
I know. And there is that feeling of, why did nobody tell me who I really am? Now, obviously, we know the answer. People didn't know it and hide it from us. They didn't know either, But, I often use the kind of Harry Potter type metaphor for that. It's like, there was this feeling that I didn't really belong here, and that I'm somebody else, really, And in this case, I didn't get a letter from Hogwarts to say I'm a wizard, but I did get a realization at some stage that I'm actually autistic, And there is an equivalence there. I think it frees you up. It opens up some sense of, I knew that there was something,
That's right. Yeah, exactly. There's a lovely article, actually, a paper written by Ian Hacking. I can't remember when. I think it's about 2009, as a matter of fact.
Yes, I think
the one about the alien trope.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the early 2000s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very common for autistic people who have not known that they were autistic to have at some time or another had some fleeting or sense of not being from this planet. Of being different or
right.
in some massive way, like not even being human, say, or not even being an earthling. It's not that people really think that necessarily, but that it crosses one's mind. And I could definitely identify with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Before social media, one of the big websites, sort of forums for autistic people was wrongplanet.com.
Oh, yes.
Still exists, but it's just that people don't use those forums much anymore.
No.
But planet.com captures something like what you're describing there. Yeah, surely. No, this can't be the planet I belong on, because if it is, it's very strange because I don't seem to fit into it. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
And actually, with you saying that people don't use that term anymore, that's rather exciting, isn't it? Because that means that thing, at least now, has been understood, largely speaking, in terms of the general population, let's say, which is, that makes me very happy, actually.
No, it is good. I mean, like maybe the rest of the world will continue to use those ideas, but they're beginning to die out a bit within the autistic community. So that's good. Yeah, we prefer metaphors now like Macs and PCs and horses and zebras. Of course, is a big one now. I thought I was some strange, weird kind of horse, and then I discovered I was a perfectly fine zebra.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, did you not? That's a meme that goes around these days. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Not a horse with dirty streaks on me, but I'm actually just a perfectly fine looking zebra.
Absolutely perfect zebra. Yeah.
And so those are the new metaphors, which are much nicer.
I'm perfect in my zebra-ness.
That's it. Yeah. My zebra, in my zebra identity.
Yeah, that's right.
But a couple of the things that I'm kind of on, my learning curve around, and kind of reading around and so on. One of them is the politics of all of this, which you're very much, I think, reading around as well at the moment, and the sort of reality of how one of the explanations for why this is coming out of the woodwork now, why there seems to be, lots more people identifying as autistic and with ADHD, apart from the fact that women weren't allowed to be either of those things, apart from the fact that people were diagnosed with BPD, apart from the fact that people just really masked to the nth degree, apart from the fact that people just thought autism is Rain Man, all of those, but also...
And it being associated with mental health.
And it being associated with pathology, all of that. But also the idea that the more, rigidly the Western world to the, neoliberal capitalist sort of model, since the 80s, the harder and harder it gets for a lot of people now, not just neurodivergent people. Life actually gets harder for quite a few people, but harder and harder and harder for those at the margins. So neurodivergent people are sort of getting exposed almost, by simply not being able to fit in with the way the template you're supposed to be able to fit in with. And I found that very revealing as part of this sort of more societal political analysis. But of course, the thing is that identity politics is not new. Identity politics is not just something coming along with neurodivergence. It's there already with gender and sexuality particularly, but also obviously with race. So that whole intersectionality notion is one that neurodiversity theory is very quickly hopping onto and saying, we fit in nicely there in terms of,
Interesting what you're saying, isn't it? Because if, thinking about it in that kind of thematic way or something, it's like physics, isn't it? Things will bend with stress, but bend, apply enough stress and there comes a tipping point where the thing breaks. And it feels to me somewhat as if that's what's happening. The voices are making the changes from the bottom up. know, so it's broken. The bending now, it's gone beyond the bending. When you know the amount of stress, as you say, with life getting harder and harder and harder in terms of the capitalism and the expectations and the overpopulation and the stressors of all kinds that we're living in now and seemingly applying harder and harder and harder. That amount of stress is tipped from now people like humans, let's say, bending and actually breaking instead.
Yeah. And then it shows, you know, and it shows initially as increased pathology because people can't cope. But when that gets analyzed a little bit more deeply, when struggling people started to connect on the internet and talk about their struggles, then it emerged actually, maybe actually we're just different and maybe we're okay and maybe we've got great strengths and we're quite creative people and we're quite interesting people and we're quite competent people and we just don't somehow fit. It brings us back to that wrong planet feeling. It's like, but I just don't fit into the way things seem to be organized around in these here parts, you know. But you know, it does mean that in talking about identity as we are today, it does raise questions about you know what sort of level of political awareness anybody, but in this case therapists, because that's the angle we're talking from, what level of political awareness around this whole area people need to have. I mean, I think it's been clear for a long time that it's not possible to seriously work with the struggles of people in the LGBTQ community without having a lot of political awareness around it. To be honest, it's been maybe equally long, perhaps, or not quite as long, that therapists would have known that you'd have to have a lot of political awareness around feminism and patriarchy and things like that to work with domestic violence, to work with even rape and sexual abuse, you know. And so I think we're heading into that territory, you know. I mean, I would probably have been officially agreed with that, but I do realize my awareness raising is on quite a learning curve all the same, you know, in reality, just around the whole political implications of this. I mean, I don't just mean future political implications as in what's going to happen, like actual political implications, as in you know, lobbying and things like that. I just mean at that deep level of the way society is structured, you know.
I think that's a very brave thing to say, and that's something that we could take from you actually and follow, because there's always for autistic people been shame in not knowing, you know, and that contributes to the hiding, to the masking, you know, to act like everyone expects. And it's okay, I think, for all of us to say we're all in a state of flux. We're all learning about everything, and this awareness is opening up for everybody, and we're all along there in different paths, and we're going to help each other.
Yeah, I do think that angle of it is, and I'm glad you're picking up on that. Yeah, I think it's important that we also don't feel we have to already know everything.
Pretend that we know.
We don't have to be you know, thinking with the party to be part of the community. You know, we can just learn and think
and say that we don't know everything, and we're doing better. We're finding out, we're learning, and we're contributing, and we're getting involved.
Yeah, but it does come back to the fact that, you know, we you know, masking includes internalized ableism. It's not just the sense of I know who I am, but I'm pretending that'll keep me safe, pretending to everyone else I have them fooled. No, it means actually incorporating some of the very sort of oppression that you're experiencing and invalidation that you're experiencing and trying to buy into it, a bit of a kind of a Stockholm syndrome, you know. So
and that explains, doesn't it, as well, when clients start to gain lots and lots of awareness that they can't mask. They're finding that they haven't got strategies. They haven't got replacement strategies for doing some of the things that they used to do before by hiding themselves underground almost to make themselves do these things.
I know. So, you know, that means that, and I think you touched on this at the start, means that, you know, it's not like, taking on, incorporating, celebrating, acting out of your truer identity as an autistic person, as an adult who's been, late discovery adult who's been asking. It's not a straightforward process. It's not just a quick segue into something new.
It's so individual as well, isn't it, for each person?
And can be quite messy in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah, kind of caught between two identities in a way for a while.
I know certainly I had a stumbling block with the word disabled, especially when I was like deep into learning about the legislation and so on. I really, really could not make these things integrate, the disabled and me. They just couldn't go together. But legally, autism is a protected characteristic, but I'm not autism, so it's really difficult, and it's so individual for everybody, isn't it, as to what they might have to take stock about.
Well, it's difficult because we're sort of trying to invent a new language as we go along, because initially we were dealing with the language that was already there, which is, again, as you said at the start of the podcast episode, that that was other people deciding our identity. So Nick Walker has a famous article it's reprinted in Neuroqueer Heresies, her book, Throwing Away the Master's Tools. And she's basically saying, we can't understand how we are learning to see being autistic by using the old language that was used to define it. Otherwise you just keep falling back into the same traps almost, and yet we're kind of building the new bridge as we cross it, so it's very kind of exciting. Well, it is exciting. I find the current times very exciting, but sometimes a bit hair-raising. I did find that over the last couple of months. I was saying that to you, that I found myself in a bit of a hair-raising space, that sense of, where is this? This is new territory for all of us. And there's nobody that much ahead of us. Fortunately, there are some people a bit ahead of us, and we had, whoever, Judy Singer and Nick Walker creating some wonderful, valuable terminology. But now we're in the game, and now we've all to do it. We've all to help create the joint autistic identity.
Yeah. And as you say, it's not without being wounded, is it? I've been through something similarly, where instead of setting me back, which it can do, and sort of make you go a bit silent and a bit unconfident and unsure-footed, but we know as therapists that just means that my worldview and my world self-concept has been shaken up, and that it's something that we'll get through, and we just cling on to the sides and carry on, so, but I got a bit, when I went on that trip, I got a bit animated and a bit anxiety kind of exuberance, let's say, and a bit outrageously in disbelief, about something. And then the impact of that hit me when I got back, and made me sort of question lots of things about the way that I see things and myself and other therapists, and other therapists' guardedness actually about neurodiversity. There was a person that I was speaking to who was actually saying about how therapy had not worked for them for years and years and years, in a very resentful way, and I was being supportive and saying, I understand what you're saying, and this person knew I was an autistic person, and they leaned over and said, actually, I'm probably autistic as well, but I don't want anybody to tell me whether I'm okay or not. And I just said, it's there, isn't it? Because you're saying like autism is equating with being okay or not okay. And we're all okay, and that's one of the stumbling blocks. It's like, and like me with the disability idea, it's like, well, what is my idea of disability? Why can't I align myself with that? these are the questions, aren't they? So I started to do a lot of reading in disability studies.
I know. Yeah. Been doing a bit of that too. And the sources of the social model of disability and all of that. And yeah, it reminds me again of the kind of, throwing away the master's tools idea, to liberate yourself, because, the DSM criteria for autism spectrum disorder, well, for a start, it's disorder, obviously, not just being autistic. The criteria they cover, even though it's a bit too child focused in the actual book, they're and the language is terrible, like fixated interests. The actual areas are relevant, they are relevant to being autistic if you kind of translate them. But also you have to be struggling. There has to be serious dysfunction. You can't have autism spectrum disorder and be doing fine in your life, because then you don't have autism spectrum disorder. Part of the criteria you have to meet is that it is causing you problems.
That's the problem, you see, isn't it? That's where it gets associated with psychiatry and mental health.
And recovering from. So now you don't have major problems in your life. You mustn't be autistic anymore, except, no, actually I'm autistic and having a good life. That isn't in that thinking, It's a little bit where the DSM is caught at the moment around gender dysphoria, because with the 2013 edition, they weren't sure whether to take it out altogether or not. And at the end of it all, they left in a version of it that says if you're struggling, and there's a lot of, suffering and dysfunction because of it, then it's diagnosed psychiatrically, and otherwise it isn't. But then, it's the suffering and dysfunction that is the issue. It's the anxiety and depression, suicidality that the person, with gender dysphoria might be experiencing, that is actually the problem. And we know that's something that needs help, but it's not anything to do with how you identify. It's back to identity. How you identify gender-wise is not a psychiatric issue.
Because those things can be from the minority stress itself will bring on those kinds of
indeed, and just all of that, all of just confusion and wondering and being caught a bit between identities and pressure from outside, and knowing how society will often look at all of this, including the psychiatric profession. So how much of the dysphoria is caused,
and being full of conflicts, like we were talking about earlier. It's like you might know some things, but am I aligned with that? Why am I? What's going on here? Why do I feel so unsettled?
Exactly.
Why do I feel distressed? Even
not having just clear mirroring and validation, So it is. It's interesting to see where all this will go in a way. But anyway, time-wise, I suppose we better leave it. Interesting discussion. Yeah. Okay. Do we know what we're doing next week, or will we wait and see?
Well, we could wait and see, or follow it with something. I mean, we started to talk about disability. I wonder whether that might be an area,
Yeah. That sounds interesting. That's interesting. Okay, well, we'll think about that. Great.
Especially in obviously disability as an identity. Part of one's identity or something like that, but also disability, in terms of in the therapy room, we're thinking about obviously the therapists, aren't we, and clients, so what it means for a person is in the positionality in life, I suppose, like legally, but also, well, in lots of ways, accepting vulnerability, lots of different things we could perhaps talk about. I don't know until we get talking.
No, that's interesting. I can think of a few things. There's actually some things around the whole disability area happening politically a bit here in Ireland. I think there's some of it going on in the UK as well, just reduction of services and changes in the law in the wrong direction, or proposed ones at least. And, unlike 10 years ago, autistic people, along with other people, are up in arms about it. So that's interesting that, autistic and other neurodivergent people have joined the battle for that, for, proper disability services. So there is, I know what you mean though. There's a mixed feeling about identifying as disabled. So look, that sounds like the run to run with then, since we've kind of begun. Okay. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Excellent.
For today then. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel, Astrid. Yeah. Nice.
Bye.
Great. Yeah. No, that's a good idea. And yeah, I'm the same. I've been reading a bit around it and so on. So we've not been on that track. So and yeah, there was some, minor political upheaval in Ireland. Mild because most people don't pay any attention to it, but in my world and people I know, yeah, a bit of upheaval around the whole disability thing. But anyway, so it was interesting to see. Reaction of the autism community, small as it is, but still, it's vocal in Ireland. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I had a quick look at your, blog posts there before we started. So that was great. Yeah, it's good stuff in them. It's good for getting the mind going.
The Vanguard one, I posted in I posted it everywhere on social media, actually, because I wanted people to sort of associate it with the course, that what kind of positionality we've got.
Yes.
And in one particular counselling place, I've got 24 people that have liked it. When you normally post things in there, no one likes anything.
Interesting.
I know. And one person's asked me, it is someone I know though, whether I want to go and do a talk to their little group, which I will do.
But see, I think like I've talked like this before. I think I can't remember if I've quite said this to you, but I do think, because I think this is the way it goes in general historically with these issues, similar issues, is that there's a cohort of people out there. They're the minority within the world in general, within society, but also in the therapy world, who are just really ripe for this. Some possibly neurodivergent themselves, or they have a neurodivergent child or whatever. In other words, they really do just want to know more about this. And a whole lot of people in the general world and in the therapy world who just not that pushed that one way or another. They're kind of thinking, oh yeah, this is going on, but I'm more interested in other things. And I suppose I should find out about that. But and then there's another chunk who are negative about it and will stay negative, and you can battle them all you like, but they'll probably just entrench, actually, some of the, can I say, older therapists, for instance, and so on, and just generally more conservative people and people who who are unfortunately trained in autism already and so think they shouldn't have to unlearn all sorts of things, but I think in society in general, we'll see that emerging, is that there's the sort of, almost waiting to be converted, there's the people we'll have to push and raise their awareness because they're just a bit sleepwalking around it, but they're not against it. And then there'll be just this crowd of people that just, they ain't going to go there. They're never going to accept trans identities. They're never going to accept neurodiversity. They're never going, including therapists, even though we might like to think otherwise, not including therapists. Some people will just go to their retirement or their grave thinking this is a whole load of nonsense and fighting against it, So we'll just
calling it things such as narcissism or
all of this. Thinking we're just wrong,
A lovely thing a client said to me once when they were talking about political things, and they said something, and they said, the thing is, the privileged people, they don't have to look at it, do they?
No, that's it. That's what it boils down to. Yeah.
The ones who've got the most power, or they've got things going their way, they don't have to. They don't have to look.
Yeah.
They stay in their 5-star hotel. They don't go round the back.
Yeah. Yeah. And, not all of, but fairly big chunks of the therapist world are relatively privileged,
Well, a lot have been, traditionally, because of obviously it used to be a long training. I mean, my training was 7.5 years, and it's a lot of money, to do, and then you're not earning anything for a long time, and you've got to pay for supervision, you've got to pay for every piece of your work to be marked, buy your own books, these private institutes. I mean, it's come down different now. It's different now, but it's still a privileged position to be able to pay to retrain, isn't it?
Relatively privileged, at least.
And I think everyone on our course certainly were either married women, and that wasn't the breadwinning kind of money, even if they were going to earn anything, or they were in the NHS or something anyway. So and this was being funded by their employer. I know.
Yeah, big political questions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think the therapy field in general is that keen on political questions. But anyway, yeah. But
Right.
there's something inherently subversive and political about being neurodivergent. It's not just we can get political. The very fact of saying the system as it exists didn't know who I was. It knew who lots of other people were. They don't have to find out who they are.
That's right.
Somehow the system that I grew up with as a relatively privileged middle-class person didn't allow me to find out who I am until I was in my 50s, kind of by accident, by luck, Now, what the hell is wrong there,
That was disgraceful, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
such a massive social injustice. I know, this is the thing.
Yeah. And that's politically subversive. That's saying, no, that's something actually really wrong there that needs fixing, not small, systemically, like Robert Chapman is saying, like just seriously off, and people rarely like that. If again, as your client says, if their life is relatively settled, they don't want to hear, but there's something massive has been missed out on in all that time.
Well, it makes them uncomfortable, and it might cost them. They might have to give up some of their stuff.
That's the thing. Yeah, like the government might have to put money that direction instead of some other direction, for instance. Anyway, I mean, politics itself might be something for us to, talk even a bit more about after we talk about disability. It'll kind of lead us more into that track. Maybe we'll just stay a little bit on the political route.
Yeah, great.
Great stuff. Okay, take care in the meantime.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, thanks. Bye.